The ancient stones spoke of terror. Kira Patel brushed away centuries of dust from the alien glyphs, her environmental suit's lights casting long shadows across the underground chamber. After 15 years of studying xenorchaeology, she learned to read more than just symbols. She could read fear. Another warning inscription. Dr. Rashid's voice crackled through her comm system. Yes, Kira replied, her fingers tracing the deeply carved marks. But this one's different. The Arxer weren't warning about natural disasters or resource depletion. They were warning about us. The chamber fell silent save for the soft hum of their environment suit's air recyclers. 20 light-years from Earth, in the ruins of a civilization that had vanished long before humans had mastered fire, they'd found humanity's reputation. That can't be right, Rashid said, moving closer with his scanner. The dating puts these ruins at least 50,000 years old. We weren't even close to space travel then. Kira switched on her holo recorder, capturing every detail of the wall. They weren't warning about what we had done, she said quietly. They were warning about what we would become. The expedition had started like any other. A routine survey of a promising ruin site on Kepler 186f. The University of Mars had funded them expecting to find resources, maybe some interesting cultural artifacts. Instead, they'd found prophecy. Look at the pictographs, Kira continued, projecting a holographic overlay that highlighted specific symbols. See this recurring pattern? It's not just about warfare, it's about transformation. The Arxer had developed predictive modeling to a level we can barely comprehend. They saw patterns in species development across thousands of worlds. Rashid's scanner beeped as it completed its analysis. The material composition is consistent with their late period. This wasn't some outlier inscription. This was their final message before they disappeared. Kira stepped back, taking in the full wall of glyphs. The story they told was both familiar and alien. A young species, blessed with creativity and cursed with violence, would one day reach for the stars. But unlike other spacefaring races, this species carried something unique, a capacity for change that defied prediction. They feared us because they couldn't control us, she realized. Look at these variations in the prediction matrices. Every other species followed clear evolutionary paths. But humans. She pointed to a chaotic scatter of symbols. We were the only ones who kept breaking the pattern. Director Zhao isn't going to like this, Rashid muttered. The coalition's already nervous about expanding into this sector. If word gets out that even ancient aliens thought we were dangerous. It's not that simple, Kira interrupted. These symbols here, they're not just about fear. There's admiration. No, that's not quite right. Fascination. The Arxer saw something in humanity that terrified and intrigued them. She activated her suit's sampling system, collecting trace molecular residue from the glyphs. They spent decades, maybe centuries, trying to understand what made us different, why we could be both the most destructive and most creative force they'd ever observed. The chamber's air suddenly felt heavier, despite her suit's perfect atmospheric control. Dr. Rashid, what if we're reading our own history backward? What if humanity's relationship with war isn't just about conflict? What if it's about our capacity for transformation? Before Rashid could respond, their comms crackled with urgent static. Dr. Patel, Dr. Rashid, Captain Torres's voice cut through the interference. We're picking up something entering the system. It's big, and it's not one of ours. Kira's hand instinctively went to the wall of glyphs. How long? 3 hours until they reach orbit. Whatever they are, they're using drive signatures we've never seen before. Rashid was already packing up his equipment. We need to get back to the ship. Now. But Kira couldn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the final sequence of glyphs. One she hadn't translated for her colleague. They showed a species that had achieved something unprecedented. They had evolved past their own predictions. Dr. Patel, we need to go. She quickly activated her emergency data backup, ensuring every scan and recording would reach Earth even if they didn't. "Coming," she said, finally turning away from the wall. But her mind was racing ahead to what these visitors might represent. The Arxer hadn't just left warnings. They'd left a challenge. Humanity's greatest fear wasn't war itself, but the knowledge that every conflict forced them to confront what they could become, for better or worse. As they rushed through the ancient corridors toward their shuttle, Kira couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to discover exactly what the Arxer had seen in humanity's future. The question was, would they live up to those ancient aliens' worst fears or their highest hopes? In the darkness behind them, the glyphs continued their eternal vigil, waiting to see if humanity would finally understand the message they'd left behind. That the species who feared war the most might be the only one capable of transcending it. Ambassador Jackson Reed had spent his entire career preventing wars. He never expected to start one by saying hello. "The transmission continues to repeat, Ambassador," Lieutenant Park reported, her holographic form flickering slightly in the embassy's secure chamber. The Valkyrie vessels maintained their position just beyond lunar orbit. Jackson studied the alien message floating before him, its crystalline script shifting between shades of blue. After 30 years in xenodiplomacy, he'd learned that first contacts usually went one of two ways: cautious optimism or immediate hostility. This was neither. "Play it again," he ordered, loosening his collar. The climate control was perfect, but he couldn't shake the feeling of something constricting his throat. The alien language filled the room, its tonal patterns reminiscent of whale song, mixed with quantum calculations, but it was the emotional undertone that caught his attention, a complex blend of fear, fascination, and something that might have been hope. "Translation matrix is at 82% confidence," Park added. "Primary meaning appears consistent with previous iterations." Jackson closed his eyes, letting the words wash over him again. "Children of Earth, you have grown as was foreseen. We return to witness your choice." "Sir," Park's voice carried an edge of urgency, "Coalition security is demanding a response within the hour. They're concerned about the Valkyrie fleet's positioning relative to our defense grid." "Of course they are," Jackson muttered. He'd read Dr. Patel's preliminary reports from Kepler 186, just hours before the Valkyrie arrived. The timing couldn't be coincidence. "Tell me, Lieutenant, what do you see when you look at their ships?" Park's hologram consulted another display. 12 vessels, approximately 3 kilometers each. Minimal weapon signatures, but their hull composition is unlike anything in our database. "There?" She paused. "They're beautiful, sir." They were. Unlike the utilitarian designs of human ships or the aggressive profiles of other known species, the Valkyrie vessels resembled abstract sculptures, their surfaces rippling with patterns that seemed to bend light itself. "They're not here for war," Jackson said finally. "But they're afraid we might be." He reached for the communications panel, then stopped. In his mind, he saw the faces of every diplomat who'd tried to prevent humanity's previous conflicts. How many had thought they were choosing the right words, only to watch them become the spark that lit the flame. "Sir, we're receiving a new transmission." They're requesting you specifically." Jackson's heart skipped. How is that possible? They couldn't know. "Ambassador Reed," a new voice filled the chamber, speaking perfect Earth standard. "We have watched your efforts to maintain peace among your own kind and with others. You understand the burden of choice." The air in the room seemed to thicken. "I'm listening," Jackson replied carefully. "Your species stands at a convergence point that the Arxer predicted but could not understand. You fear war not because you are weak, but because you know your own strength. This paradox has shaped your evolution in ways that defy all models." Jackson thought of the ancient warnings Dr. Patel had discovered. "You knew the Arxer. We are their legacy, as you are their greatest question. They departed this realm seeking answers about existence beyond physical form. We remain to watch, to learn, and to wait." For what? For you to demonstrate whether a species can master its capacity for both creation and destruction. Your Dr. Patel has already begun to understand. Humanity's fear of war is not a weakness, but your greatest strength. It drives you to find alternatives that other species cannot imagine. Coalition Security's deadline was approaching, but Jackson barely noticed. Why reveal yourselves now? The answer came with a weight that seemed to press him into his chair. Because another species has discovered what the Arxer knew about you. They believe the only solution is your extinction before you can achieve your full potential. They are coming. Warning signals flared across the embassy's systems. Lieutenant Park's hologram sparked with new data. Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of the system. These aren't Valkyrie ships. Jackson felt the weight of billions of lives settling onto his shoulders. The next words he spoke would set humanity's course. You said you came to witness our choice. What choice? Whether you will face this threat as you have faced others. By becoming something new, something that transcends the very concept of conflict, or whether you will prove your enemies right by responding as they expect, with mere force. The new ships were coming into range now, their designs angular and predatory. Jackson thought of all the wars he'd helped prevent, all the times humanity had pulled back from the brink. But this was different. This wasn't about territory or resources or ideology. This was about humanity's right to exist, to continue evolving into whatever they might become. How long do we have? Moments. Their weapons are already prepared. Jackson straightened his back, feeling the weight of history pressing against him. Lieutenant Park, patch me through to Coalition Command, and maintain our channel with the Valkyrie ships. He took a deep breath. It's time to show them who we really are. The stars seemed to hold their breath as humanity faced its greatest test, not of their strength or their technology, but of their ability to remain true to their deepest fears and highest hopes, even in the face of extinction. Commander Naomi Zhang stood on the bridge of the UES Peacekeeper, watching humanity's nightmares take physical form. The enemy fleet, the cracks, as the Valkyrie had named them, stretched across her view screen like a constellation of daggers. All ships report ready, Commander. First Officer Thaddeus Ibrahim announced, his dark eyes reflecting the tactical displays. The Coalition has authorized Protocol Omega. Naomi's fingers brushed the ancient pendant at her neck, a yin-yang symbol passed down through her family for generations. Balance in all things, her grandmother had taught her, even in war, especially in war. The Cracks vessels are charging weapons, Lieutenant Hassan reported from Tactical. Their energy signatures are, ma'am, they're beyond anything in our database. What about the Valkyrie? Naomi asked, her voice steady despite the tension coiling in her stomach. Maintaining their position behind our lines. Their shields are active, but weapons remain dormant. Ambassador Reed's voice crackled through the command channel. Commander John, the Valkyrie believe we have approximately 3 minutes before the cracks open fire. Whatever we're going to do, it needs to happen now. Naomi closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the simulation runs they'd performed. Conventional warfare against the cracks was suicide. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's, but that had never been the real plan. Signal the fleet, she ordered. Begin Operation Chrysalis. Across 50 coalition ships, crews moved with practiced precision. This wasn't the response the cracks expected. It wasn't the response any traditional military force would choose. But humans had long since learned that the best way to win a war was to change its very nature. Quantum resonators online, Ibrahim reported. Consciousness synchronization at 60% and climbing. The crack ships launched their first salvo, a wave of energy that could shatter planets. But the Coalition fleet didn't dodge. They didn't return fire. Instead, they began to sing. It wasn't sound in any conventional sense. The ships themselves were vibrating at quantum frequencies, creating patterns that ripple through space-time itself. The Valkyrie had helped perfect the technology, but the underlying theory came from humanity's own research into consciousness and reality. Synchronization at 80%, Ibrahim called out. The Crack's vessels are adjusting their attack patterns. They're confused. Of course they were. They had come expecting either surrender or a futile last stand. Instead, they found themselves facing something unprecedented, a fleet that was transforming the very fabric of space around them. All ships, maintain the resonance, Naomi commanded. Remember your training. Don't fight the connection. Let it flow through you. The bridge crew's consciousness merged with their ship's systems, then with each other, then with the entire fleet. It was like being a single cell in a vast organism that was just awakening to itself. The Crack's weapons fire dissipated against shields that weren't really shields at all, but localized alterations in reality itself. The energy was absorbed, transformed, and fed back into the growing consciousness web. They're trying to adapt, Hassan reported, his voice distant as part of his awareness remained in the merge. But they can't match our frequency. The pattern is too human. That was the key. The Cracks had expected logic, strategy, the familiar patterns of warfare. Instead, they faced the full complexity of human consciousness, fear and hope, rage and compassion, all channeled into a force that defied their understanding. Synchronization at 95%, Ibrahim announced. Quantum field is stable. We're ready for phase 2. Naomi opened her eyes, seeing both the physical bridge and the vast web of connected consciousness. Send the message. In all languages, all frequencies. Through the combined power of 50 ships and their crews, through technology that blended the physical and the metaphysical, humanity spoke with one voice. We choose to become more. The quantum resonance peaked. Space itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, in a moment that would be studied for centuries to come, the coalition fleet transformed. Ships merged with their crews, consciousness merged with reality, and the boundary between the physical and the spiritual dissolved. What emerged was neither weapon nor vessel, but a new form of existence that the Arxer had glimpsed in their predictions millennia ago. The Crack's fleet faltered. Their weapons, designed to destroy matter, had no effect on beings that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Their tactics, based on millennia of warfare, meant nothing against an enemy that had transcended traditional concepts of conflict. They're retreating, Hassan whispered, awe in his voice. The entire Crack's fleet is standing down. Naomi felt the combined relief and triumph of 50 crews flow through the consciousness web. They had faced extinction and responded not with superior firepower, but with superior evolution. The very thing that had terrified the Arxer, humanity's capacity for radical transformation, had become their salvation. Signal from the Valkyrie ships, Ibrahim reported. They're applauding. I think that's the closest translation. Open a channel to all vessels, Naomi ordered. As she prepared to address the fleet, she touched her pendant once more. Balance in all things, including the balance between what they had been and what they had chosen to become. The war had been won without a single shot fired, but the real victory wasn't over the Cracks. It was over humanity's own limitations. They had proven that their greatest fear, their capacity for transformation, was also their greatest gift to the galaxy. Dr. Marcus Foster hadn't slept in 3 days. The data streams from Operation Chrysalis had overwhelmed every quantum computer in the Institute, and still they kept coming. As the lead researcher on human consciousness evolution, he should have been thrilled. Instead, he was terrified. Another transformation reported in the Centauri sector, his assistant VI announced. Civilian vessel this time. Crew of 15, all successfully evolved. Marcus rubbed his temples, staring at the holographic displays filling his lab on Luna Base. The patterns were undeniable. What had started with Commander Zhang's fleet was spreading. Humanity was changing, not over generations, but in real time. Show me the neural patterns, he ordered. The display shifted, revealing intricate webs of consciousness that defied traditional physics. Compare with baseline human patterns from pre-Chrysalis. The differences were stunning. Where normal human consciousness operated within well-understood parameters, these evolved minds existed in multiple states simultaneously. They weren't just thinking differently, they were being differently. Dr. Foster. A familiar voice called from the doorway. "We need to talk." He turned to find Kira Petal standing there, still wearing her expedition gear from Kepler 186f. She looked exhausted but determined. "The Arxer knew this would happen," she said without preamble. Those ruins weren't just predictions, they were instructions. Marcus felt his heart skip. Instructions for what? For how to guide a species through the ultimate transformation. They left them for the Valkyrie, who waited until we were ready. She stepped closer to the displays. But they couldn't predict what form that transformation would take, because it had to come from us. "It's happening too fast," Marcus muttered. "We don't understand the implications. Some of these evolved humans. They're not just changing themselves, they're changing reality around them." "That's the point," Kira insisted. "Our fear of war wasn't about violence. It was about our terror of what we could become. Every conflict pushed us to evolve, to find new solutions. The cracks didn't realize they were catalyzing our final evolution." But Marcus wasn't convinced. "We're losing our humanity." "No," Kira's voice was soft but firm. "We're finally understanding what humanity truly is." Before he could respond, every display in the lab flared with new data. Somewhere in the Orion sector, another group of humans had spontaneously evolved, their consciousness expanding beyond normal space-time. The price of survival, Marcus realized, was transformation. But as he watched humanity take its next step into the unknown, he wondered if they would recognize themselves when the process was complete. The observation deck of Ganymede Station offered the best view of what many were calling the Great Awakening. Ambassador Reed stood with Commander Zhang and Dr. Foster, watching as waves of quantum resonance rippled through the solar system. "The Valkyrie are calling it the fulfillment of the Arxer prophecy," Jackson said quietly. "Humanity becoming what they always had the potential to be." Naomi nodded, her consciousness still partially merged with the quantum field that now connected all evolved humans. "The cracks have requested peace talks. They've never encountered a species that chose to transcend war rather than wage it." "But at what cost?" Marcus asked, his scientific mind still struggling to accept what his instruments told him. "We're not just changing our bodies or our minds, we're changing the fundamental nature of what it means to be human." "That's exactly what the Arxer saw in us." Kira's voice came from behind them. She joined the group at the window, her eyes reflecting the ethereal lights of evolving consciousness. "Our capacity to reimagine ourselves, to become something new when faced with extinction." The four of them stood in silence, witnesses to humanity's greatest transformation. Across the galaxy, humans were awakening to their new potential, their consciousness expanding beyond physical limitations. The fear of war that had driven them for millennia had finally led them to transcend the very concept of conflict. "The Valkyrie asked me something interesting," Jackson said finally. "They wanted to know if we regret learning about the Arxer predictions, if knowing our potential somehow forced our evolution." Naomi smiled, touching her yin-yang pendant. "We evolved because we chose to. Not because it was predicted, but because when faced with destruction, we chose to become something more than destroyers. The data suggests this is just the beginning," Marcus added, his scientific curiosity finally overcoming his fear. "Each new evolution opens up possibilities we couldn't imagine before. We're not just changing, we're gaining the ability to guide our own development." "That's what the Arxer truly saw in us," Kira concluded. "Not just the capacity for change, but the wisdom to fear our own power and the courage to use it anyway. Our fear of war wasn't a weakness. It was the key to our transcendence." As they watched, another wave of consciousness evolution swept through the solar system. But this time, it felt less like an ending and more like a beginning. Humanity had faced its greatest fear, not of war itself, but of what they could become. and chosen to embrace that potential. The fear remained, as it always would, but now it served not as a warning, but as a guide. In fearing war, they had learned to wage peace. In fearing change, they had learned to master it. In fearing their own potential, they had finally learned to fulfill it. So, Jackson asked, watching the lights of evolved consciousness dance across the solar system, what do we become next? The answer seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, carried on waves of quantum resonance that connected all of humanity. Whatever we choose. And in that choice lay both their greatest fear and their greatest hope, the endless possibility of what humanity could become.